Good morning, everyone. My name's Neil. I work on the marketing team at Robotics. Really excited to get up and talk to you about our research. Just before we got started, Paul, who heads up our Manchester office, said to me, "Be the best," which sent my anxiety skyrocketing. And then he gave me a playful jab in the ribs, which then took the wind out of me. So I'm probably not doing kind of a southern softy reputation any good, but I thought I'd share that and say, please go and introduce yourselves to Paul. Maybe you'll get a jab in the ribs as well from us at Read.co.uk. So we have quite a clickbaity title today, various different kind of iterations on it. Will we work for robots? Will robots be our boss? I guess if we're going to get to a point in our presentation, it's around the future of work in a world of AI and robotics. And there's kind of several key areas that we wanted to cover in this. First of all, we wanted to understand how we as consumers have kind of got used to the increase of AI and robotics in our everyday consumer lives. We then wanted to understand what UK employees thought around the safety of certain job roles. And then we finally wanted to move into what employees thought around the safety of their own role. So looking at sectors in the first instance, and then the kind of confidence people had within their own jobs and their own lives. But we wanted to start off with a little introduction to Reed and almost like a nice little handy timeline for tech over the years. So Reed started off on the high street in 1960, which is around the same time that the first ever robot was put to work. It was about the size of a house. Which is interesting how things have changed since then. The first typewriter was launched, and it's interesting how lots of things change, but some things stay the same, in that the QWERTY typeface that you see on computers today, that's always remained even as far back as the 1960s, and is still prevalent on laptops and desktops today. It was also the first time the cassette tape was used, for those of you that remember cassette tapes, as I do fondly. Fast forward to the 90s, the advent of the internet, which means internet language, Java is used for the first time. And also the Nintendo 64, who some of you in this room might have lost hours to in youth, misplaced. Particularly GoldenEye was a favourite of my own. It's interesting that by the time the Nintendo 64 rolled around, it was already the 5th generation of game consoles, which again speaks to how quickly consoles and technology has evolved in a very short amount of time. Fast forward to today, and Read.co.uk is a website that attracts a unique audience of around 7 million visitors every single month. We've now got sites on not only desktop, on laptop, on mobile, as well as offering apps to both job seekers and recruiters. So again, a kind of an indication of how times have changed. But it's also a time in which we're living in augmented intelligence, which we'll talk about in some of today's slides. We've also got autonomous vehicles, or self-learning vehicles. It's no longer about vehicles that can just get you from A to B, driverless. It's about how those vehicles learn to drive themselves. It's interesting and it's changing. And we're familiar with virtual reality, but what's now becoming more and more prevalent is augmented reality. And I've got a little bit of an example for you here. And you'll notice in this short clip as I talk over it, none of the audience are wearing any kind of goggles or 3D glasses. That's all able to take place, and it's kind of like a much more advanced version of holograms. So it's really interesting that that's the case, and that's kind of the world that we're living in now. Here's a little bit more of a practical instance for it and how we might go on to use it in our day-to-days, whether it be in sort of 5-10 years' time. But we might very well see instances where we're able to check the weather, our emails, look for news, look at certain data trends and graphs. It's all a little bit Minority Report. And hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavour of what to expect from the rest of today's presentations. So as well as kind of trying to deliver some insights for you in terms of how UK workers think, it's almost like a quirky whistle-stop tour in the world of technology and the weird and wonderful world of technology. So our research is formed of over 2,000 responses from a cross-section of many UK employees, representing all the regions, all the job levels, and as many of the sectors as we possibly could get hold of. We ran this in August this year. We rolled out a kind of a preview at In-House Recruitment Network Live, and we've kind of been sharing it with individuals like yourselves at events like this. Finally, before we get on to the crux of the research, it's just a shameless plug, completely upfront and honestly with you all. We have a number of Amazon Echo Dots to give away. Simply feel free to take a picture of our research, share it amongst your networks, inflate my growing sense of narcissism. And if you want to do that during our presentation or throughout the day at our stand, you'll be with a chance of winning an Amazon Echo Dot. We'll make sure one of those wings its way to you as soon as we can do post-event. Shameless plug. So the first area that we wanted to discover is, again, we talked at the top of the presentation around how we as consumers, just how technology and AI has just become part of our everyday life. So it's this kind of idea of this humans versus robots. a consumer view of today's automated services. And again, thinking back to our whistle-stop tour of the weird and wonderful world of tech and how this is kind of that tech and robots are becoming the norm, here are two instances of two robots. On your left-hand side, you'll see Inca, and on your right-hand side, you'll see Kimber. Just by show of hands, is anyone familiar with these two robots? That's cool, that's not to worry. If you go to King's College, you'll be greeted by, or if it was sort of 10 years ago, you'd been greeted by Inca, and nowadays you'll be greeted by Kimber. They are at the reception of the technology department of King's College London. And it was the first instance whereby Inca on the left-hand side was programmed to kind of have a call and response to understand the questions that it was being asked and respond in kind. They got a little bit of PR traction because they were able to up the sassiness in terms of the response that Kimber on the left was able to produce. So on one particular day, you could find yourself being greeted by a very grumpy, sarcastic robot. Times have changed because Kimber has replaced, I guess as all good employees that come to the end of their career, Kimber was replaced by Inca, and Inca is this example of automated intelligence or autonomous intelligence. Kimber is able to understand from its surroundings. It's more, rather than it being vocal recognition, it's visual recognition, and it learns the more that you interact with it. So it's able to understand just by visualizing what's in front of it, if there's a group of people, how the response might change, and also how people's facial features are reacting. If they're kind of in an angry fashion, they're trying to get somewhere quickly, it can respond in kind and tailor its response to the audience that's in front of it. So it's really interesting that it goes from kind of a programming at a basic level to an increase of kind of autonomous intelligence. Really interesting example for us. So we asked people, what do you prefer, in terms of just looking at it from a consumer level. If you're we gave a scenario in our survey. If you're at the cash out or the checkout at your local supermarket, which are you more likely to go for? Are you likely to go for the self-service checkout or people man checkout? Just by show of hands, who would go for the people man's checkout? Interesting. And as you can see, that probably tallies with the stat that we've got here. So humans win, but only just. 57% of people said they prefer people-manned checkouts over self-service, which is interesting because we might have thought that in today's world of convenience and things being quick and kind of time being a key factor, that self-service might be the easiest way to go. But actually, people prefer that human element, that human touch. But why is that? Well, it's because humans are, and I've put here supposedly, more personable, they offer greater peace of mind, and they're more reliable. What's been really interesting for us is when we've rolled out this research, people have suggested that actually they go to the people man checkout because they're buying booze, and they won't be able to get it put through on the self-service. Didn't realise how much alcohol was going to have an impact on our insights, but there you go. So in terms of this, people are more reliable. It might very well be the case, or certainly in this instance it was the case. This is an example of a robot in a tech exhibition in China injuring a passerby. So this kind of iRobot world style incident happened. So maybe there's this point around there's a little bit more reliability with humans. Robots aren't always perfect in every instance, and this was one that got some news coverage in it kind of going wrong. What was really interesting to us is when you looked at the audience in terms of age and how they differed. And what we found out was that the young were in tech shun shock. Try saying that 10 times fast. 72% of 18 to 24-year-olds prefer people man checkouts, which I think was a significant increase. I think there's this assumption that younger people are adopters of technology. We're seeing a trend away from that, and actually there's more reliance again on a people man checkout. Again, that might relate back to the booze point. Booze is really becoming a factor in this presentation. But what's also interesting is when you look at 25 to 34-year-olds, that's the audience, and I count myself among those that prefer the self-service scan. So maybe there's this idea of this kind of world weariness, and we just want to get our shop over and done with, so that we prefer the automated checkouts just to get the job done. Interesting. Here's another robot that looks really inappropriate for this time of the morning. This is a robot called Telenoid. Now, Telenoid is a robot designed to simulate. Again, it's a voice recognition robot, and it's designed to simulate the end. It kind of understands speech coming from the end of a telephone, and it's supposed to replicate the emotions that it hears from the voice on the telephone to the person who is its